Hi there, good morning everybody, and welcome to the Race Advisor. Happy Thursday. It actually took me about half an hour this morning to realize it was Thursday and not Friday. I seem to have totally lost track of the days of the week at the moment. I hope you're really well. I hope you have had a good week so far. So really looking forward to this live stream. We're going to give it a few minutes just as I can see people are still joining us here. So thank you very much for joining. Now, please don't forget to get involved in the chat while we do this. If you're on YouTube, that's going to be over here somewhere, I believe. You're going to have a chat over here on YouTube. You can put questions in there. You can chat to each other in there. So please do drop a message in there. If you're on Facebook, please just leave a comment below this stream. Put that message in there, and that works like a chat. I'll see both, which is absolutely wonderful. So today we're going to be looking at overstaking, and we're going to be talking about how this affects you, why most bettors actually do this, and how you can make sure that you don't do it in future. So you can see a couple of people still coming in, so I'm going to give it 30 more seconds. I'll have a quick sip of water. If you want to grab a pen, a piece of paper, do that, and we will get started. Okay, so let me just share with you my screen, and then at the end we're going to maybe go through any questions you've got or anything else that you may be talking. So overstaking. Now, overstaking is going to be killing your profits, and what we want to look at today is how we can actually stop that. So the first thing that I actually would like to do is I'd like to ask you a couple of questions. So if you can leave me a message when I do this, that would be absolutely great. Hi, Philippe. Thank you for joining us today. So the couple of questions here I'd like to ask is, the first one is, what do you think is a good strike rate? And just put that in the chat box or in the comment box if you're on Facebook. Just put that in there. What do you think is a good strike rate? And the second question is, what bankroll size in points do you think you would need for this strike rate? So those are the two questions. And I know there's a little bit of a time delay here, so I'm going to come out with those questions again in a second. In the meantime, please don't forget to give the thumbs up or the like button. If you're doing it, it lets YouTube, it lets Facebook know that you enjoy what we're doing. So the two questions that I'm asking for those who have just joined us is, what do you think is a good strike rate? And what bankroll size in points do you think you would need for that strike rate? So drop that into the chat now, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this up on the screen so you can see what the averages answers are across YouTube, across Facebook. I'm going to put that on the screen in a minute. Hi, Dave. Thanks for joining. Hi, Paul. Hi, Alan. Great to have you here. Thank you very much indeed. So there is a bit of a time delay of about 10 seconds. So if it seems that I'm talking for quite a long time in between asking the questions, that's why. It's because I'm waiting to hear your answers. So what do you think is a good strike rate, and what bankroll size in points do you think you would need for that strike rate? And we've got some great answers coming in here. Dave, thank you very much for the point bank. Could you let me know, Dave, what strike rate you would expect to have with that? Got some great answers coming in here from Stark, Mike, Dave, Paul. It's absolutely wonderful. Thank you. Keep them coming in. If you've just joined us, I can see a whole load of people have just joined. If you've just joined, welcome. Thank you for joining. It's great to have you here. We're looking at overstaking and why it is killing your chance of making a profit in horse racing. And I'm asking two questions. And the question is, what do you think a good strike rate is? And what bankroll size in points do you think you would need for that strike rate? And we got some great answers coming in here. Now I'm going to drop in a little bit of a sticky note. I've never done this before, so I'm hoping that you can now see a sticky note on your screen. I'm just going to put at the top of this one strike rate. I'm going to make a new one over here. Let's bring them over so that they actually here. Bankroll. And what I'm going to put under this, I'm going to put the average answers that you are giving me to these two questions. So again, the two questions, if you've just come in, what do you think is a good strike rate, and what bankroll size in points do you think you need to have for that strike rate. Alan, Alf, thank you, Alan, Philippe, Dave, Paul, brilliant. Keep them coming in, because I'm going to take the average in a minute and I'm going to put them on these sticky notes. And when I've got them on these sticky notes, we're then going to look at actually what this average is and what it means. And there's quite a range at the moment, which is great to see. So, okay, let me see if I can start working out this average. But please do, if you haven't yet dropped in your answers to these questions, please put them in. What do you think a good strike rate is? And what bankroll size in points do you think you would need for this strike rate? So coming down here, we have actually a range from about 20% to 60% for strike rate at the moment. But it's averaging out at probably around about 30%, which is sort of where I was expecting it to average out, actually. So it's averaging out at about 30%. Now, sorry, quick sip of water there. 30% there. And what we're seeing is, again, quite a big range in point bankroll. But the average is probably sitting at about 100 points, roughly. So it's about a 30% strike rate and about 100 points or units, I usually call it, but 100 unit bankroll. So this is what the average is that we're seeing. Okay, so a strike rate of 30% and an average of a 100 unit bankroll. Okay, now I'm going to try something. I'm going to move to the next slide, and what I'm hoping is that these sticky notes are going to stay where they are. Could you just let me know? Can you see those sticky notes? Am I doing this right? I've never used the sticky notes before. Let me know if you can see the sticky notes in the chat, because I'm about to talk about what's on them in a minute. And if you can't see them, that could make it slightly difficult to understand what's going on. So drop me a message. Let me know if you can actually see these sticky notes or not. And while that's going on, while I'm waiting for an answer to come through, whether you can see them, please don't forget, if you are not yet a Race Advisor Pro member, you can join the waiting list at raceadvisor.co.uk/join RA. Okay, great. Thank you, Matthew. Okay, so you can see the sticky notes and they have stayed. Look at that. Wonderful. It's all working. Okay, so the average strike rate that you were paying was about 30%. And that expectation was a bankroll of about 100 units. So from that, we can work out what the average odds are. Now, let's add another sticky note here. I'm going to bring these down a little bit. So the average odds, well, if we've got a 30% strike rate, an average odds are going to be 3.33. But let's assume we're making the profit. So let's say the average odds are actually going to be 3.5. Okay. So we're getting average odds of 3.5 and a 30% strike rate, which means we're going to be making a little bit of a profit there. Now, you can see that drop there on that average note. Can I make them a darker font? Do you know what? I actually don't think I can. I was trying to do this earlier, and let me try one other thing for you. Hang on. I don't think I can make them a darker font, Philippe. I do apologize. So we've got a strike rate of 30%, a bankroll of 100 units, average odds of 3.5. Now, what is the expected losing streak? Okay, does anyone have any idea what the expected losing streak is going to be for a 30% strike rate, roughly? Drop it into the chat if you have an idea of what you think that losing streak is likely to be. And what I'm going to do in a minute is I'm going to put what the losing streak is actually going to be. And we're going to do this losing streak based on 4 bets a day, 120 bets a month, or 1,460 bets a year. So that's what we're going to be basing this losing streak on. And drop that now into the chat. What do you think the losing streak is likely to be? I've lost the chat. Okay, 15 to 21. 15, 12. Okay, so the losing streak with a 30% strike rate that we can expect over the course of a year is we can expect to hit Philippe, you got it almost exactly there. We can expect to hit a losing streak of at least, put it here, 21. At least 21 back-to-back losing bets over the year once. Now, of course, it could be higher than that. We might get a losing streak that is actually more than that. Now, what does this mean about the bankroll? So the first thing about the bankroll here is that we should really have 10 times our losing streak as a bankroll. So what the bankroll should actually be actual bankroll should be 210 units. Now, we will say that if you're really pushing the bankroll to the minimum you want is 5 times your expected losing streak, which means that actually with 100 units, you're not far off the absolute minimum. It would be 105 units with the absolute bare minimum, but recommended is actually 10 times your expected losing streak. So a bankroll of about 210 units to cope with 21. And when we say bankroll here, what we actually mean is this is the amount of units you are prepared to lose in their entirety. So if you've got 210 units, you should be prepared to lose all 210 units. If you're only prepared to lose 100 of those units, then actually your bankroll is only 100 units. So the bankroll is not just the amount that you have in your betting account, it's actually the amount you are prepared to lose on the strategy or the portfolio or whatever it is. It is the total amount you're prepared to lose. If you have £1,000 in your betting account, but actually you know that you're going to be uncomfortable if you lost more than £500, then your bankroll is actually £500, not 1,000. So the bankroll has to be the amount you are prepared to lose. And with an expected losing, well, with a strike rate of 30%, most of us would assume a bankroll of around 100 units, and that's totally understandable because this is what tipsters say. This is what people tell you. So that's totally understandable. Now that bankroll is the absolute bare, or it's actually just below the absolute bare minimum you should have, because you can expect to have at least one losing streak a year of 21 back-to-back losing bets, at least one. And you may get a longer losing streak than that. So you might have one, but you could also have 2 or 3 of those. Now imagine if you had 2 or 3, and obviously there'll be a couple of winners before, but you can see how a downswing could easily be 50 units over the course of a year. You could easily be in a downswing of 50, 60, even 70 units over the course of a year. That's why a bankroll of 105 units, which is 5 times the losing streak, that's the minimum, the absolute minimum you should have, is still cutting it pretty fine. The actual bankroll you should have is at least 10 times really your longest expected losing streak, which would mean 210 units. And that's nearly double what the majority of us think it should be. And a great question here, from Humphrey. I'm just going to drop this on the screen. Should you have the amount in your account starting off or be willing to deposit if losing streak? I would suggest you have the amount in your account starting off that you're prepared to lose, and everything else in your bank. So your betting account should only contain the money you're prepared to lose, and that is what you are working with. Because if you've got to redeposit, that's a different emotional issue that takes place at that point. Whereas actually, if you have that amount in your account, and again, you can see this, if you had a downswing of 60 or 70 units, which would be totally within expectations with a strike rate of 30%, over the course of a year, that could certainly happen. You'd have lost 60 or 70% of a bankroll that was only 5 times the losing streak. But actually, you wouldn't even have crossed near to 50% downswing of a bankroll of 10 times. So that's why you need to be bankroll properly. Now, working out the percentage of bankroll that we can actually bet, because what I want to show you now is a different type of staking. So this is obviously based on flat staking. So how can we see how much we are likely to be overstaking? Because almost all of us overstake. That is something that all gamblers, all bettors, all horse racing fans, it's what we all do. All of us do it. And this is how we can see how much we are likely to be overstaking. And we do it using proportional staking, or which is loosely based, for those of you who know the Kelly criterion, proportional staking is kind of a loose base on that. So I'm going to bring up yet another sticky note here. I'll drop it down. I'm going to put it over here, but a little bit apart. So proportional staking. This is where we bet a percentage of our bankroll. This is where we bet a percentage of our bankroll based on the odds. Now, we know we've got average odds of 3.5. So let's just assume we have an edge of 1.5%, okay, which is a pretty good edge. An edge of 1.5% is pretty good. Now, the way we work out what proportion of our bank we would bet on a horse of odds 3.5 with a 1.5% stake is very simple. We simply take our 1.5% edge, which is 1.5, and we divide it by our odds minus 1. So we take the average odds of 3.5, and because it's decimal, we take the 1 off, which is the stake. So that gives us average odds of 2.5. So with a 1.5% edge, a horse bet at 3.5, a horse that we are betting with odds of 3.5, we would stake 0.660% of our bankroll on that horse. Okay, 0.60%. So actually slightly more. That means that the bankroll would be slightly less than the 210 units. It's going to be kind of about 190, but it's going to be around that 200 unit point. So you can see if you are betting with a bankroll of 100 units, 1 unit a bet, you are actually overstaking by nearly 100% of actually the recommended stake based on the odds. And for those of you who bet on horses that may be odds of 8 to 1, 9 to 1, 10 to 1, if you bet on a horse that is odds of 9 to 1, then actually you would be staking, the right stake for that horse is going to be about 0.15% of your bankroll. And if you stake more than that, you are going to be overstaking. So you can see by doing that, we can start to see, and you can do this now, you can do this immediately with your own betting. You can start to see how much you may be overstaking. So if you have a bankroll of 100 units, take the average odds of your horse and work out how much proportionally you would be staking using proportional staking. And that will show you how much you are overstaking by. On average, most people are overstaking by 100%, and it can go as high as 200 or 300%, and in some cases, it can actually be 1,000%. The difference is absolutely massive, and that's how you can see how much you're overstaking. And when you overstake, there is risk. So let me just get rid of these sticky notes. Okay, so what does this overstaking actually mean? It means huge risk. Okay, it really means huge risk. Overstaking means that you are betting more per bet than is optimal for your bankroll. And what that means is that you are taking a massive risk of losing the entire bankroll. Every pound, every penny that you stake above the optimal stake is going to have a significant impact on risk. So if you are overstaking by 100%, you are going to be risking losing your entire bankroll by maybe 3, 4, or 500%. You're going to increase that risk exponentially. So just because you are overstaking by 100%, you know that you are going to exponentially increase the risk of losing your entire bankroll. And of course, if you are assuming your bankroll is only half of what's in your betting account, or you'd only be happy losing half of what's in your betting account, that risk is going to be even bigger again. So that's what overstaking means. And the truth is, most bettors actually do overstake. most bettors overstake, and overstaking causes one of two things to happen. In 99.9% of cases, overstaking is going to cause one of two things to happen. And the first thing is that, like we've just said, the chance of losing your entire bankroll is significantly higher, hundreds and hundreds of percent higher, the chance of losing your bankroll. And the second is panic will set in on a losing streak, because you're overstaking. When you hit that losing streak, the dent made in your bankroll by that losing streak, by that downswing, is significant, much more significant than it would be if you were staking at the right level. And this has a huge emotional impact, because emotionally we then panic. We then panic that we're losing. And this is when we go, oh, I'm losing my bankroll really fast now. Well, you shouldn't be, because actually, if you were staking at the right level, that feeling wouldn't be happening. It would be more curtailed, because the percentage loss to your bankroll is obviously going to be much, much lower. And actually that panic that's setting in is valid, but most people then assess that panic is due to the wrong reasons. But when you stake correctly, a losing streak will just have a small impact on your bankroll. And this happens primarily because we are, as horse racing fans, we are impatient. Now, it's quite reasonable. We want to see the results from our efforts as quickly as possible. And we don't want to spend 8 hours a day finding selections and then walking away with like a £5 profit, or maybe we've been placing £10 bets and we spend 8 hours a day analyzing races, finding selections, doing the work, and then we walk away with a £5 profit from those £10 bets. Let's say we're using £1,000 bankroll, so we have that 100 units in the bankroll, meaning £10 stakes with £1,000 bankroll. And because we're getting frustrated, because we're spending this time and we're walking away with a £5 profit from these £10 bets, we go, actually, do you know what? I'm staking such a small amount of £1,000, so I'm going to start betting £25 instead of £10, or maybe £50 instead. And this is great, because now we're like, wow, look, I'm actually making £50 a day now. This feels good. This feels kind of like a reasonable return on my time for the money. But the trade-off that we're making here, and the trade-off that is not often recognized or acknowledged by doing this, is that we're almost guaranteed to lose our entire bankroll when we hit a losing streak. By increasing the stakes like this, you are almost guaranteeing you will lose your entire bankroll. And when this happens, we tend to think that the method has stopped working, or the strategy doesn't work, or our analysis has broken, or we've been doing something wrong. But the actual truth is, the problem is we are massively overstaking. And by massively overstaking, we're guaranteeing we're going to lose the bankroll at some point, because there isn't that safety net for when we hit the losing streak, for when we hit the downswings. Yet when it happens, we don't assign it to overstaking. We assign it to the method, the analysis, the selections, the process. Whereas in fact, the process may not have changed. The selections may be fine. You've just hit a statistical losing streak. And because of overstaking, that has caused the damage to your bankroll that it has caused. And it's not actually your fault, because bookmakers want to tell you how much you can win from a single bet. That's what they're promoting. That is what their marketing is all about. Bookmakers want to tell you how much you can win from a single bet. They want to show you the possibility of how much money you can make from a bet in order to get you to bet more money. That's their goal. But we can't look at it as a single bet, because that's not long term. And we know we can't make profit short term in that way. If we want to be profitable over 6 months, a year, 2 years, we have to look long term. We have to. There is no other option. But the bookmakers want you to look short term. Everything that they do and they say is all about short term, because they know short term bettors lose money. So you don't see a bookmaker coming out saying, hey, look at this awesome offer we've got. Look at this awesome offer. This is great value. If you bet on these bets 100 times, and we're going to let you do that, but if you bet on these bets 100 times a year, you can make 3% return. And you don't do that, because that's not going to, A, that's not going to get them bettors, and B, that's going to lose them money. But the primary thing is it's not going to get them bettors, because most bettors don't go, oh, wow, a 3% return on my turnover. That's amazing. No, bettors like to see, do you know what? I can bet £10 and make 190 back. I can bet £10 and make £800 back. That's what most bettors like to see. So bookmakers tell you that. But as horse racing fans who want to make long-term profit, what we actually want to know is, when I bet on similar bets 100 times, will I make that 3%? Will I make that 5%? That's actually what we want to know. Knowing how much a single bet is going to pay out is great, but it doesn't actually give us any indication of the big picture. And the big picture relates to how we are analyzing and how we are selecting. And the whole bookmaking industry, the whole horse racing industry, is focused around the short term for this reason, because it's the short term that makes them their money. So instead, what we've got to do is we've actually got to change our mindset. We've got to start, or I should say, we've got to stop looking at the pounds that we see when we are early on. We've got to stop looking at the pounds that we see and start considering the return on investment. Actually, do you know, I'm going to use these sticky notes again so that we've got this up here. Let me bring this up here. Stop looking at pounds and start looking at ROI. This is critical. We have to stop looking at the pounds and we have to start looking at the ROI. And these questions, I can see questions are coming in and they're awesome. I'm going to come back to every single question. So please keep asking them. I will come back to every single question. So when we do that, let's think about this. If we have £1,000 bankroll, if we have £1,000 bankroll, let me get another sticky note. Right. If we have £1,000 bankroll, we should expect to place bets between £1 and £10. And most of the time, they're going to be sitting probably around £3, £3 or £4, assuming you're not betting on really long odds horses or really short odds horses. So for most of us, it's going to be £1 to £3 the majority of the time, and we may get the odd £10 bet or £1 bet at the extremes. And that's from £1,000 bankroll. Now, most people are going to go £1,000 bankroll, £3 bets. That's crazy. That's crazy. That's so little. And if you spend an entire day analyzing races and you walk away with a £5 profit, let me ask you this question. Let me ask you this question right now, and drop your answer into the chat, whether you're on Facebook, YouTube, wherever. Just drop this answer into the chat now. If you had £1,000 bankroll and you spent a day analyzing races and you walked away with a £5 profit, would you feel that that was pretty low earning for the time that you have invested? Drop your reply to that in now. If you had £1,000 bankroll and you spent an entire day analyzing races and you walked away with a £5 profit, would you feel a bit deflated? Would you feel that you hadn't really earned very much for the time that you had spent like analyzing those races? Would you feel a little bit gutted about how that happened? Drop that in there now. Let me know how you would feel about that. Okay. And while you're doing that, I'm just going to come back and answer some of the questions that have come in so far. Matthew, is the AE on the system builder, is that your edge? It's actually not your edge. Calculating your edge is surprisingly complicated. Calculating your true edge long term is surprisingly complicated. But I would suggest for most bettors, if you've got an AE of kind of around 1.05 or higher, you'd be okay to use 1.5% as your edge. If you've got an AE that is kind of between 1.01 and 1.5, you probably want to use 1% edge. And that's just a rough ballpark, but we can look at how you truly calculate your edge later on. What the AE shows you is that you have an advantage. Alan, should stakes not be flat rated but dependent on bet odds? Absolutely. Flat staking is fine. And as an RA Pro member, you'll know, go into the horse racing success pages, look at the SSP staking method that I outlined there, because that's actually what I recommend. But ultimately, you should always stake. Your stake size should always ultimately be based on the odds, because look at it like this. A horse at 20-1 has less chance of winning than a horse at evens. And we all know that. A horse of 20-1 has less chance of winning than a horse of evens. So that's fine. That's general knowledge. So why would we stake the same amount of money on a horse that is far less likely to win? You wouldn't. And for bankroll growth, you will always stake more money on the horse that has the higher chance of winning. Okay. Now, if you're going to take that to the next level, it's actually odds versus edge. But that's only if you can calculate the edge per bet. And most of us aren't going to be in a position to be able to calculate the edge per bet. So we just use the odds instead. Okay. I hope that answers that. Keep please answering that question as well. I can see there are things coming in that if you had £1,000 bankroll and you spent an entire day analyzing races and betting on them and you walked away with a £5 profit, would you feel a bit deflated? Would you feel that your time hadn't really been paid for properly? Matthew, thank you very much regarding the system builder. Philip, I'd stick my head in the microwave for a minute or two if that happened. Flying Benny, yes, very disappointed. Mike, yes, if this was every day. Paul, fair enough. Humphrey, yes. Mike, great, Mike. It is still profit, but I would agree a bit deflated. Alan, low return, so disappointed because it'd be 1 to 2%. Mark Bothman, we're trying to find winners is not the way to go. Okay, so this is great. So generally the feeling is we would be a bit deflated, but there is also there are some of you who are like, you'd be a bit deflated, but I kind of would accept that this is part of it, which is awesome because that's kind of where we want to get to. Michael Pittman is proportional staking, is staking based on the Kelly criterion. Proportional staking is based on the Kelly criterion, but it removes essentially the requirement to know the edge per bet. So that's kind of the difference. And proportional staking is essentially the same as making the same profit per bet. So kind of, making £1.50 or £5 every bet or targeting, because then you're changing the stake based on the odds. And it's essentially the same thing. But it's a simplification of the Kelly criterion, which is why I tend to recommend it over the Kelly criterion when you get started. So I want to look at this differently because there was generally a level of kind of disappointment if you had £1,000 bankroll, you spent an entire day analyzing race, you walk away with a £5 profit. So I want to try and reframe you now. I want to try and reframe your thinking on this. So let me put this to you differently. I'm going to ask you the same question again when we finish reframing this because, because actually let's look at this. If we'd made a £5 profit, this means £5 profit equals a 0.50% increase in bankroll. In one day, we've made a 0.5% increase in our bankroll with that £5 profit. Okay, so 0.5%. 0.5% doesn't sound like a huge amount, but if you put, actually, before I say that, 0.5% doesn't sound like much, but if you did that every day on average, 0.5% every day on average equals double bankroll in 200 days. Think about that. That means that £5 profit from a £1,000 bankroll, you spend your entire day analyzing the races, you got a £1,000 bankroll and you walk away with a £5 profit. That's a 0.5% increase in your bankroll. And if you did that every day on average, some days you may make 2%, some days you'll lose. But if you did that every day on average, you would double your bankroll in 200 days. In 200 days, in less than a year, you would double your money. Now, if you put that £1,000 in the bank, for argument's sake, you would make £5 profit in 365 days. Okay? You would make a £5 profit in 365 days. Now, admittedly, you haven't got the time spent. You just put it there and you've sat there. But there is almost no investment out there where you can double your money, your starting pot, every 200 days. Yet, most bettors, like we did here, most bettors think that this £5 profit on £1,000 in a day is disappointing. It's bad. It's not a good return. I feel a little bit gutted that I've wasted my time, because our focus is on the pounds. It's not on the actual return that we are making, because actually the return is phenomenal. If we want to make £50 a day, we need a £10,000 bankroll. That's the difference. It's not that we are making a bad return. It's that actually we are focusing on the wrong thing. If we want to make £50 a day, we do exactly the same thing, but we need a £10,000 bankroll. And I can hear a lot of people aren't prepared to risk £10,000, and I understand that. But this means one thing. This means one thing. It means that you're not yet confident enough in your approach. And that means that you're still learning, which is fine, because that means you're still practicing, which is also fine. And that means you're still adapting, which is also fine. No one's saying you should start with a £10,000 bankroll. But actually what we want to reset is our mindset to stop looking at the pounds. Because traditionally, horse racing fans look at a £1,000 bankroll, spend a day and think, do you know what? We should be able to walk away with 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 pounds a day on it. Well, that's insane. That's like, the only way you will ever get that is by huge risk. And when that happens, that is almost always because you're overstaking. 99% of the time it's because your stakes are too high for your bankroll. Actually, when we stop looking at the pounds, because the pounds of profit, the actual money that we're making of profit, is directly related to the size of our bankroll. It's directly related to that. If we had £100,000 bankroll, we'd be looking at about £500 a day, assuming we can get our stakes on. And we would be, because we'd still only be looking at kind of £1,000 stakes. So we'd still be able to get them on Betfair, on most horses, kind of, 10 to 1 and lower. But so the actual money that we're walking away with is directly related to our bankroll. So we should not be looking at that as an estimate of success. We should be looking at our returns, our return on investment. And 0.5% a day, 0.5% on turnover, on 0.5% increase in bankroll a day. So if we had the £1,000 bankroll, let's say we were staking £3 bets, for argument's sake, and over the course of the day, maybe we had, it's a whole day's analysis after all, let's say we had, 7 bets or 8 bets maybe, so 3 times 8, so we bet kind of about £72. So actually our return on investment with our £5 profit is about 7%, roughly. So our return on investment is about 7%, which is pretty good. That's over the 5% that I recommend you stop at. And we've increased the bankroll by 0.5%, which is also amazing. That means we're going to double our bankroll every 200 days. So, as I say, if one hasn't got the £10,000 bankroll, then you're not going to make the £50 a day. But that doesn't mean what you're doing isn't right. Think of this like being in university for horse racing. Think of it like being in university for horse racing success. But the difference is, instead of paying £9,000 a year for it, you actually have the possibility of doubling your investment every 200 days while you're still learning. While you're still learning, you have that possibility. And that's assuming that you're not compounding your profits. Obviously, if you're putting 70% of your profit back in, that's going to happen even faster. And when we start reframing our mindset, let me take these sticky notes away. When we start reframing our mindset and our expectations, everything changes. Because when our mindset and our expectations change, we actually position ourselves for success. We give ourselves the opportunity to succeed in making a long-term profit from horse racing, because we've now adapted our mindset to something that is achievable, and we then give ourselves this opportunity. And most horse racing fans, most bettors, don't ever give themselves the opportunity to succeed, because They are fixated on the actual profit figure rather than the return. And the return may be excellent, but because it's £5 a day and there's £1,000 bankroll, it's perceived as poor. Whereas actually there is almost nothing that you can do to make that kind of return anywhere else, which makes it a skill worth learning. Okay, now I hope that has been useful. I'm going to come now to questions. If there's any questions on this, please drop them in now. I'm going to come to any questions. I'm going to go back through to see if there have been. If there are any questions, obviously, on anything else to do with horse racing, please also drop those in as well. But this mindset around staking, overstaking, and bankrolls is absolutely key to us to be able to succeed long term. Because if we don't do this, if we don't look at it like this, you're almost guaranteed to not be able to make a long-term profit, because statistically, purely mathematically, you will hit a losing streak or a downswing that will wipe your bankroll out. And you can guarantee that will happen if you're not staking properly, if you are overstaking. And 99.9% of us overstake. And then when we lose that bankroll, we blame it on something else. Okay, I'm going to come back to the questions. If you've got any, please do drop them in. As Paul says, there is always tomorrow. If it's just a chance of something happening for fun, would you bet sun tomorrow? David, I'm not quite sure what you mean by sun tomorrow. Let me know, sorry. Ben has got it exactly right. Ben said, when I was asking before about whether you'd be disappointed, he said it depends purely upon how much you would stake that day. And if you'd only staked 15 to 20 pounds, that's a good return. Absolutely. To be honest, I would say as long as you made over a 5% return, that's a good return. 5% return is generally what I would recommend as your average minimum return that you want to make long term. So some days, obviously, you're going to lose. Some days you may make 1%. Some days you may make 10%. But 5% is kind of where I would recommend you stop adjusting your strategy. Flying Benny, can you do that? Oh, sorry, that was to David. Can you do that each way? Matthew, it's all about compounding profits. Absolutely. Ben, absolutely. 0.5% compounding each day. And when you start compounding it into your bankroll, that's where the power comes. But always, always, always remember to take 30%. Every time your bankroll reaches a new high point, take 30% of that new profit out of your bankroll and take it out. Even if that's like 30p or £1, take it out of your bankroll anyway, because it's psychologically, it's so important to always be removing some of the profit. It doesn't matter if it's 30p, it doesn't matter if it's 2p, remove it from your bankroll. It is very, very important psychologically when you hit a losing streak, a downswing, that you have actually removed something. Alan is the same as Ben. I'll accept 0.5% compounding. Humphrey, if you show consistent profits. So great question here from Humphrey. If you show consistent profits, could you then mid-season increase 1k to £5, to 4k to £20 per day? If you had the funds to do so. Of course, if you are comfortable with your strategy and you are happy to lose more, you always have to look at it as in, I could lose this, and you want to inject more funds into your bankroll, then obviously you can do that. You can absolutely do that. That's totally down to you and what you've got available and whether you're prepared to do it. But always remember, you have to be prepared to lose it all. So only do that if you are prepared to lose the extra money you are injecting into your bankroll. If you're not prepared to lose it all, don't do it. Just stick with your bankroll and let it grow. Let it grow slowly. And if you compound actually, and you can make that 0.5% on average growth a day, and you compound it, you will double your bankroll faster than every day, because you can readjust your stakes at every new high point. And if you go proportional staking instead, where you're staking based on the odds, then actually your stake is going to be a percentage of your bankroll every time you bet. So it's going to be going up and down depending on the current size of your bankroll too, which will also increase it. And if you do that, the growth of your bankroll will increase significantly faster too. Just a comment here from Robin that might be useful to everyone out there as well. I say the square root staking plan works very well when you have average 5-to-1 winners at 25% win rate. That's obviously what you're using, Robin, and it's working really well for you, which is wonderful. If you're not sure what the square root staking plan is, it is over on the Race Advisor blog. Just head to the blog and search for square root staking plan or staking plan, and it will pop up. Thank you, Matthew, for joining us. Going through all your bots and adjusting your bets based on the odds. That's exactly right. Matthew's about to go through his bots and make the adjustments on the stakes based to the odds. Absolutely exactly what we should be doing. Mike has again come back saying that makes perfect sense. Wonderful, and please, that makes sense. A couple more questions here. If you have any more questions, please do drop them in now. And don't forget, if you're not an RA Pro member and you would like to be, please do head over to raceadvisor.co.uk/join RA. Currently, we are closed to new members, but we are looking at possibly opening up some spaces at the end of the month. And if you join the waiting list there, you'll get a notification of a webinar to join me on when that happens. Humphrey. To get an accurate strike rate, how many bets would you want to base it on? I.e., 100 bets. To get your accurate strike rate, you want to base it on as many bets as humanly possible. 100 was probably the minimum, and you want to keep track of that as you get to 250, 500, and when you start into 1,000 bets, at that point you can start to really have confidence that your strike rate is kind of solid and it's holding at that level. 100 is minimum, really, and then you want to keep going from there. Now, obviously, that's a little bit dependent on how many selections you're having a day, to how long it may take, and how you researched it. So if you researched it in a system builder, you should have an idea of strike rate. If you researched it manually, you should have an idea of the strike rate as well. So obviously that changes a little bit. You can only do the amount of bets that you are having. Don't force bets to get the strike rate. But until you get to 100, be prepared that there could be some big movements in strike rate, and then still potentially sizable movements between 100 to 250. When you start getting above 250, it should begin to get more consistent, more solid. Bet365 won't allow you to take less than £5 out. I haven't been able to bet with Bet365 for a long time. John, if you have an edge, an RA ratings definitely provides the opportunity to find that. Thank you very much. You need to deploy that edge as many times as you can to avoid missed opportunities. And this is absolutely exactly, John. I totally agree. And what John is saying here is that once you have an edge, when you find an edge, effectively you want to push as much money through the window on that edge as you can, but you still have to do that in relation to your bankroll size. So if you've only got £100, the bets are going to be small. If you've got £10,000, the bets are going to be bigger. The amount of profit you make is directly related to the bankroll, but as soon as you've got that edge, you want to be doing it, reinvesting, doing it, reinvesting, doing it, reinvesting. Michael, if your strike rate is 30%, would it make sense to only back over 3-to-1? Do you know, this is an awesome question, actually, because this is a common thought for most horse racing fans, for most of us, is that, like, if I've got a 30% strike rate, should I only back over 3-to-1? No, is the short answer. And the reason for that is we get a 30% strike rate. That strike rate includes the horses that are evens and odds on. And obviously, they're going to significantly increase our strike rate to 30%. If we have a 30% strike rate and then we start only backing over 3-to-1 to try and get value, we're actually cutting out those shorter odds horses that are probably significantly increasing our strike rate to get 30%. Our strike rate may then drop down to 15% or 18%. So no, if you've got a 30% strike rate, if you've got that without implementing some sort of price rule, some sort of odds rule that it's got to be above or below, don't then change that later on, because it will change the entire group of horses that you are considering and that you are looking at. Sorry, Mark is saying that Bet365 are working to drug dealers, but illegal. You should really be using Betfair. I recommend everyone uses Betfair. However, if you can get best odds guaranteed, often you will get better odds than Betfair on best odds guaranteed. So hunt for the best odds that you can get while you are able to, and then start moving over to Betfair as well. Okay, so that's all the questions. I hope that this has been able to show you why so many bettors make the mistake of overstaking and then assign the problems that it causes, which is generally loss of bankroll, to something different to overstaking without realizing that actually the problem is the stakes are too large. And that when we look at it, while we may feel disappointed in the returns that we have made, like in terms of on a financial level, in terms of pounds, like if we have that £1,000 bankroll and we made £5 in a day, and while we may feel a bit disappointed because it's not low, that actually when we start looking at this from a return on investment, from a growth in bankroll perspective, from an ability to compound it, it is actually phenomenal. It is actually huge. The reason we've only made £5 is because we haven't got more money to invest, but we haven't got that yet. And the only way we're going to get that is by making sure we don't lose our bankroll due to overstaking. Because if we don't lose our bankroll due to overstaking, we can keep growing it. We will keep growing it, and that bankroll will go from 1,000 to 2,000 to 5,000 to 10,000 to 50,000, and then we will be making that £50, £100 a day that we wanted. Okay, awesome. Carl, if you've missed a session, don't worry. It will stay on Facebook, on our Facebook page, in the video section, and on YouTube as well. Whichever platform you prefer, it will be there. You'll be able to see it after the event. It gets uploaded, I think, in about 15 minutes. Once we finish, you'll see it there. And last question just come in from Humphrey. Working out average odds, would you use Betfair SP or fractional? I tend to use, if you're working out your average odds, use the odds that you have taken. Now, if you're taking Betfair SP, that's fine. If you are not taking Betfair SP, and you can get better odds than Betfair SP if you watch the markets, but if you are not taking Betfair SP, use the odds that you have actually taken to work out your average odds. And personally, I always do it decimal, and the reason for that is it becomes easier in a spreadsheet or a file to actually perform any sums that we may want to perform on it to work out AE or return on investments or average odds, things like that. It just becomes a lot easier if it's in the decimal format. Michael, question from Michael quickly as well. Isn't value an important part of the selection process? Yes, value. Yes and no. This is a tough question actually, which may need a longer answer than I can give here. Yes, value is an important part of betting. You cannot make a profit without value. And it can be a very important part of the selection process, depending on how you select things. But inherently, value is not found by putting an odds limit in place, be it a high odds limit or a low odds limit or both. Value is not found by doing that. By doing that, what you are doing is you're restricting horses to a certain pool, so you know that these horses are going to win a certain amount of time. The two ways that we find value, generally speaking, well, there are three ways to find value, but most of us are only going to be able to do two of them. And the first way that we find value is by building it out kind of systematically. And we can get value in that way. Now, processes that only use a systematic approach to finding selections can find value, but usually it's quite a small edge. So value is there, but the edge is quite small, and it can be eroded quite quickly if something changes in the market or more information becomes available, or people or a piece of information that you're using in that system becomes more visible, so more people are aware of it, and that edge can be eroded quite quickly. But obviously we can find value that way. The other way we can find value is obviously by form reading, and often people who form read may make an odds line, but that odds line is likely to be semi-accurate. and the value is more instinctively understood because they have been form reading for a period of time, and they know that they are getting value on the horses that fall within a certain area of their own odds line, or even if there is no odds line made, they know they are getting value on those particular horses because that's been seen by the profit that's been made. Obviously, at the Race Advisor, we actually recommend that you use both processes combined. So we use a systematic process to find contenders, and then we go in and do some form reading, predominantly with the FMFR method. If you're an RA Pro member, you'll know what that is, to then actually determine which of the contenders we're going to bet. So we're using the power of a systematic approach for speed, and then we're still using the power of our brain to actually find that final value and make that final decision. The third way of finding value, which is not going to be suitable for 99% of people, is statistically. And the reason it's not going to be suitable is that it is phenomenally difficult to create an accurate odds line. It is almost, I would say, probably impossible. I mean, some of the best horse racing modelers and statisticians out there have never been able to create an odds line that is more accurate than the market without using the market as one of their pieces of information. So, and these guys generally have, the people who do this, they are generally teams. There are statisticians involved in the teams. They have people often at racetracks who are rating horses based on what they're actually seeing, and they are skilled race readers as well. And it is a huge machine that requires significant input, process, and monitoring continuously to do. So that, generally speaking, I don't talk about that because it isn't actually inside the realms of possibility for most people, because it's kind of a huge team effort with very high-level statisticians and modelers. So, Philippe, exactly. The new system builder does exactly that inside Race Advisor Pro. It allows you to use stats to gain your edge, but I still recommend that you take those contenders where possible and use the FMFR method on them afterwards, because that will significantly improve your advantage. Question here from Robin, and this will be the last question I'm going to take. Should you lay a horse if it drops in odds over 3 points just before the race starts? No, not particularly. If it shortens, there's no reason to specifically lay it, unless you are focusing on horses that have indicated that when they do this, they then lose the race or they then drift in play. But just because a horse has dropped odds, it's definitely not a reason to lay it. Absolutely not. If you have a strategy that finds horses that historically do this and then go on to lose, so that we believe we can trade these out in running, or there's already an indication it may make a loss, or may lose the race and therefore make us a profit by laying, then that's a different thing. But if it's just purely because of the odds, no is the answer. You shouldn't just lay the horse. I would almost guarantee that long term that wouldn't make a profit. I don't know without checking it, but my gut would say that almost certainly that wouldn't make a profit. Okay, well, I'm going to draw it to a close here. Thank you so much for joining me today. I do hope that you've enjoyed it. I hope it's taken a little bit out of the monotony of lockdown. I've had a wonderful time myself. Thank you very much for joining. I hope this has been useful. I will look forward to seeing you soon. Please don't forget to like this video and share the Race Advisor YouTube channel if you're over there, or the page with friends by hitting that button below. If you want to join the waiting list for RA Pro, please head to raceadvisor.co.uk/join RA, and I will see you very soon. Thank you very much indeed. Have a wonderful weekend.